Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here. Nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find the grills, the canopies, the jerseys, and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour at undefeatable prices every day. Shop Academy at locations throughout Ohio, including Zanesville, Springfield, and Boardman. Fun can't lose, and neither can you with tailgate gear from Academy. Shout out to Academy Sports and Outdoors for being a faithful partner of this show. Speaking of this show, that's Mick Walker. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. We're here to talk Ohio State football. We're going to talk some big questions for the Buckeyes during the off week. Ohio State taking the week off. Not really. They've got practice on Tuesday and Wednesday. They'll be off for a couple days over the weekend while the coaches do a lot of scouting, things like that, recruiting visits. Mick might have more of that over at lettermenrow.com here in the coming days. But we're going to talk about big questions that are still looming for this number one ranked, top ranked Ohio State football team. Mick, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Like you said, we're just covering a little bit of recruiting, preparing for the off week. You and I were both talking weekend plans earlier today because we essentially get 2 weekends with our families throughout football season. Not complaining. That's just the situation. You got to prepare and handle it as such. So we got stuff going on, but you also got to get content out to the great people at Lettermen Row and in the Letterman Lounge.
Yeah, exactly. Full disclosure, I'm a little nasally still. I told you guys on Monday that I wasn't feeling well. I think I sound better, but I still think I'm a bit, just getting there. So it's improvement week for the Buckeyes. It's improvement week at Lettermen Row. I'm trying to improve my health. Mick's trying to improve lettermenrow.com, which he's always doing, of course. And we're trying to see what Ohio State needs to improve on. Mick, you want to start offense or defense? I'm giving you the honors.
Let's start offense because that feels like that's an easier point to discuss.
All right, so over at lettermenrow.com, where you can get all of our coverage from the recruiting side, the team side, from Mick, from Austin Ward, from Jeremy Birmingham, from Alex Gleitman, and I guess from me as well, Spencer Holbrook. You can get all of our coverage over at lettermenrow.com. $1 for your first 7 days, which gets you through the bye week and into Penn State week. I wrote 3 critical looming questions for the Buckeyes offense. The first one is, can Julian Sayin continue his incredible efficiency? He's an 80% passer on the year. That would be an all-time college football record ahead of the 2019 Joe Burrow passing season in which he won the Heisman Trophy. The second question is, what's next at right guard for the Buckeyes, considering Josh Padilla and Tegra Shabola are both candidates there. Shabola obviously has been the starter. Padilla is trying to take over that job. And then the third one is, our young playmakers ready for bigger roles? We're talking Isaiah West, we're talking Bo Jackson, we're talking Mylan Graham, we're talking Quincy Porter. Those guys all have new roles to play. Can they become bigger contributors into this offense? Which of those 3 did you think caught your ears or eyes the most, Mick?
It's got to be the right guard spot just because, I mean, Austin Ward asked about it to Ryan Day on Tuesday, and it's been talked about, I think, in about 4 or 5 different threads on the Letterman Lounge message board. You can come join in those discussions for $1 for your first 7 days. But it feels like Taylor Shabola should be removed from the lineup at this point, and after the kind of the struggles he had against Wisconsin, considering those are also things that have persisted throughout the whole season. And Josh Padilla, the little bit that he's gotten in, the more and more he's gotten in after, like since a couple of games ago, everything is just kind of steadily improved on what he's shown, and what the Ohio State offense has done with him actually in the lineup. Like the positives have been there for Padilla, and the negatives have kind of been there for Tagra, and it hasn't really gone away in 2 or 3 games now.
Yeah, Shabola had his worst game on Saturday against Wisconsin. Technique was an issue. Ryan Day talked about technique with the offensive line and getting things blocked up, and he wasn't going to point any fingers. And you know what? Like, full credit to Ryan Day for not calling out players, but it's pretty clear who he was talking about on Tuesday when we talked to him about some of the technique issues, some of the things, guys getting hit in the backfield. Just flip on the TV copy, even will tell you. But the film, the coach's copy, and the All 22 really show and paint a picture of what Ohio State was dealing with there at right guard. I don't think Josh Padilla was perfect, but I think that he was good enough where it's time to probably make that switch, especially when you have an idle week and you're not as worried about the Penn State front as you probably were heading into the season, even though I think Sir Blitz-a-lot Jim Knowles is going to give the Buckeyes a lot to chew on there in that game on November 1st, since he knows the Buckeyes staff so well. Again, Padilla wasn't perfect, but I said this on the Lettermen Row message board in the Letterman Lounge, and I think it holds some truth. Maybe I'm just tooting my own horn here. I would right now take the potential ceiling of Josh Padilla that's probably going to come with some growing pains over what's known, the known quantity the known commodity of 23 games of starting experience from Taylor Shabola. He's been the starter for 23 games. We know exactly what it's going to be, what the deal is. With Padilla, they really like his upside. They like what he could be, moving forward. But Carson Hinsman may come back for another year. So then you're talking about Padilla not playing center again next year. So if he's a guard of the future for you, and you think that he can be a guard right now who could start for you, I think it's time to probably make that move.
Yeah, at this point, it just doesn't feel like the difference between what Josh Padilla's worst is that much greater or that much different or worse than what Tager Shabola's worst is. And that's not a knock on Tager again. It's just he's had his moments where he's had lapses, whether it's technical, like you mentioned. You posted a good picture on the Lettermen Row message board where he just kind of has his chest over his feet. He doesn't look like he's in a great striking position. So then all the defensive lineman has to do, and as they've done a couple times this season to him, is kind of just swipe your hands and you've lost. And that's what you give that's when you give those tackle for losses up, which knock down or 2 or 3 yards, and now you're behind the sticks. Obviously, Ohio State overcame it. They were behind the sticks when the Carnell Tate touchdown to open the game, but still, that's not where you want to live, especially when you're going to get into this meat of the schedule where you got, again, Penn State isn't all that great, like isn't where they were preseason, but they're still going to have a good defensive line. They still got Zane Durant, denied Dennis Sutton, so that's going to challenge you. Then you have Michigan coming down the line, who again does not have 2 first-round pick defensive tackles, but they are also very good players in that up in Ann Arbor. And obviously, Ohio State has aspirations and goals past that to win the Big Ten and make another run to a national championship. So if you're going to do that, you're going to face a lot of good defensive linemen. And it feels like Taylor Shabola right now isn't really capable at his best to handle that. And there's also the layer of, and you know this better than I do because you have kind of the better statistics, but a lot of the stuff they like to do with Luke Montgomery, whether it's pulling or moving him around, either inside or outside, whatever he wants to do, they aren't really able to do as much with Taylor Shabola because he's not as mobile, and some of his technique stuff is not as on point. So then if you can't do that, you're limiting your run game by about half just because you can't do certain runs to the opposite side.
Yeah, no, I think those are all valid points. I also just think that it should be noted that we've seen Tegra play at his best when he's been doubted. So this kind of pressure could vault Tegra to bigger and better things. I think that's a possibility that Ohio State still could see this season. And I don't think it's time to completely give up on him. But right now, the way that he's been playing, it's time, I think, to make a move. And Ohio State has kind of started to drift that way. If you listen between the lines with what Ryan Day was saying on Tuesday, it's becoming a little pretty clear that I think it's probably time to at least see if Josh Padilla can do more for you than Tegra can, because Padilla was good in the 2 or 3 drives he got at Washington. So I think we're going to see that. I think it's probably time to see that. We'll see how it goes. So, and if it goes poorly with Padilla, you can always insert Shabola back in there. You know exactly what you're going to get in him. And I think the interesting thing, Nick, is for a fact that if Tegra Shabola is your starting right guard, you can win a national championship. Because you've already done it with him as a 16-game starter last year. He was the only offensive lineman to start all 16 games for them last year. So, obviously, you can win one with him. But the idea is 5 best. And who's your best? Who's in the best position to help you win a second straight one? And it may not be Shabola this time.
And the other layer of it is, and it kind of builds into the young playmaker ideas. What Ohio State did when they had won a national championship, they had 2 top 50 pick running backs in the backfield with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. They don't have that this year. You have Bo Jackson, who's gotten the past couple starts and has looked very good. You've got Isaiah West, who flashed a lot against Wisconsin, sorry. And then you have CJ Donaldson, who's racked up touchdowns in the goal line, but still, I don't think he's been exactly what some people were kind of hoping for with him this season. So when you have 3 running backs that are not as good as the 2 you had last season, and obviously, he's not starting for an NFL team now. He was not going to be the greatest Ohio State offensive lineman ever, but Josh Fryer, at his best when he was playing last season, is probably better than what Phillip Daniels has been so far, just because he had so many snaps accumulated at that right tackle spot. So when you consider that the people that he's playing around are not as good and the people that he's blocking for are not as good at the current moment, it's reason to believe that him being at his point right now is affecting things even larger than it was last season if he was struggling.
Yeah, so let's move on to some of those young guys. Obviously, Bo Jackson has been in a big role all season since the Texas game. He had back-to-back 100-yard games in the wins over Grambling and Ohio. Then he becomes the bell cow back against Washington, despite not starting that game. And then he's started ever since. So he's already entrenched as a young guy who's making an impact. But now you've got this second freshman running back in Isaiah West, who was a 3-star prospect, but make no mistake about it, Ohio State was so much more excited about him than a 3-star ranking would indicate. There were some people in the building who thought that Isaiah West could have been the best running back that Ohio State took between Bo Jackson, Isaiah West, and Turbo Rogers, and that includes some of the highest level people at Ohio State who thought that Isaiah West had the highest ceiling. Now that he's healthy, because he wasn't healthy in the spring, he didn't start August training camp with a full plate of work to have because of the continuing rehab and bringing him back from an injury he suffered as a senior in high school. They were quite confident that he could be a star, Mick. Not as a freshman, though. And now, all of a sudden, with C.J. Donaldson struggling on the ground, with James Peoples still trying to figure it out on the ground, you have these two freshman running backs who all of a sudden look like your two bell cows. And I'm curious if Ohio State continues to lean on those two. It's clear that they trust Isaiah West because he was getting carries in the first half when Ohio State was only up a couple of scores instead of up 5 scores at Wisconsin. You know, Quincy Porter is a wide receiver who was the first guy to lose his black stripe among this 2025 recruiting class that's proving to be completely loaded with future stars. Now he's starting to come along. 2 catches for 30 yards, including a 22-yard catching run on Saturday. Milan Graham, who's not a freshman in that same category, but he didn't have his freshman spring. He showed up in June. He went through his first year as basically trying to skip through the learning curve. Now he's finally at a spot where he can play a little bit more. The young guys are starting to emerge on this roster as playmakers, Mick. And Ryan Day even said, you know, guys like C.J. Donaldson, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, they need these young guys to come along if these guys are going to play 16, 17 games and stay fresh.
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I think we could probably pull them out at some point. But in terms of just forced missed tackles and things where you're creating yards past what's blocked, I believe Isaiah West and Bo Jackson have already surpassed what the upperclassmen in the room have. And that kind of just speaks to the natural ability of those two, even though the freshmen, again, obviously Wisconsin's defense is kind of haphazard at this point, but still Isaiah West did a lot better than I think even people on the coaching staff would have expected him in that situation because he was just creating yards and he had a couple of explosive runs.
Yeah, I'm pulling them up right now. I was hoping that you would keep talking a little bit more. That's all right, though.
No, we can go into Quincy Porter, though.
What's that?
I said we can go into Quincy Porter, too, though. I just didn't want to. I wanted to stay on the running backs for another quick second because that's probably the biggest discussion amongst any of these young playmakers. And again, Quincy Porter deserves a talking point here in a second, but the running backs really do deserve a look beyond what they've even received against some of the lesser competition Ohio State's faced recently.
So among all the running backs on the Ohio State roster, Bo Jackson has 68 carries. He has broken 9 tackles and he's forced 6 missed tackles. James Peoples on 40 carries has broken 4 tackles, has 2 forced missed tackles. Isaiah West on 21 carries, so basically half of what James Peoples has. Isaiah West on 21 carries has broken 3 tackles and forced 2 missed tackles. C.J. Donaldson on 60 carries, so triple what Isaiah West has broken 1 tackle and forced 0 missed tackles. That's all according to Sports Information Solutions. I don't know what Pro Football Focus has them at. I could probably pull that up even quicker than I did the Sports Information Solutions, which I'm very grateful to work for a place that gives us these kind of tools and allows us to do these things because those are huge numbers. Like, it's clear that the 2 most elusive backs on this team and the running scheme that they're deploying for this team requires you to make a safety miss because he's the only guy left to tackle. It requires you to make corners miss and make linebackers choose the wrong gaps. Like, the way that they run this run scheme makes it to where you have to do those things. And so I do think that if you want the best way to run this run game, and that sounds redundant, but the best way to deploy this run game, you need Isaiah West and you need Bo Jackson to be really good this season. And it's pretty clear that they are. I mean, Bo Jackson's averaging 4.81 yards after contact. Isaiah West is averaging 2.9 yards after contact. That's higher than both Donaldson and Peoples right now. Missed tackles forced. Bo Jackson, 14, according to Pro Football Focus. James Peoples, 7. But on almost half as many carries, Isaiah West, 6 forced missed tackles. C.J. Donaldson on Pro Football Focus has only been credited with forcing 2 missed tackles. So no matter where you look, the 2 big places that we look for these stats on, the missed tackle numbers tell you C.J. Donaldson and James Peoples are not as elusive as Bo Jackson and Isaiah West, and I think that's where Ohio State's going to have to lean toward is this youth movement in the running back room.
Yeah, there's a need for those 2 guys there the same way. And it's weird to say when you have a wide receiver room with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, but there's also a need for really a third outside wide receiver. Again, Ohio State isn't the biggest wide receiver rotation in the country, but when you look at it, once you get past those 2, it's kind of who else is going to go out there? Is it Mylan Graham? Is it Quincy Porter? And that's where you get it's just these 2 young guys because those are the 2 most talented guys. And Quincy Porter at 6'4", 6'5", whatever he is, he's exactly what Ryan Day and Brian Hartline want on the outside. You kind of saw that with some of the plays he made, but also some of the blocks he had in that game against Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly. Before we get into all the wide receiver talk, though, Mick, if you haven't noticed, I have a little bit of extra fuzz on my face this week because I'm a little lazy during the off week. But when I need to get right, the first place I'm going to go, of course, is Dollar Shave Club because they have gotten me to get right. When you rep your team, don't stop the jersey. We don't. Dollar Shave Club's collegiate razor handles combine grooming with glory, letting students, grads, and fans show their school spirit and style. From the sink to the stadium, shave with pride. Visit dollarshaveclub.com. Grab your college handle today. That's dollarshaveclub.com. They have a beautiful Ohio State razor handle on that website. Go there right now. Get that today. Mick doesn't use one because he's a burly man. I've shaved my face. Dollar Shave Club is the only place that I will go. Mick, let's talk wide receivers then. Quincy Porter leads Ohio State in yards per route run. Now, that's pretty misleading, if I will, considering he's only run 11 routes. So, all of them have come wide. None of them have been in the slot. Carnell Tate's run 17 routes in the slot. That's 9% of his routes have come in the slot. He's at 3.23 yards per route run. Jeremiah Smith is only at 3.14 yards per route run. So it shows. The reason I bring those up is because it shows you how they want to use Quincy Porter. They use him as a downfield guy. I asked Ryan Day on Tuesday if Quincy Porter's emergence on the outside as an option could allow them to use Carnell Tate more in the slot. What do you think of that?
I think it's a great point. I think it's something even when Marvin Harrison Jr. was around or Carnell Tate or any of these big-time wide receivers they've had, there's always been discussion about if we move them in the slot, you can kind of create more matchups. And Ohio State did that. They were, truthfully, it seemed like they were touchdown hunting with Jeremiah Smith there at the end of the game, and understandably so because you want to get the stats in for the country's best wide receiver. I mean, he had all the catches. He just didn't have a touchdown in that situation. But other than that, I think what Quincy Porter brings, like you said, is not only the ability to stretch the field, but there's what he had. I think Ryan Day even called it a pivot route or along those lines. And he had another catch where both his catches were not the deepest route. They weren't throwing him fades, but he caught the ball. He ran well. Since he's a bigger body, it's harder for defensive backs and corners, especially in Wisconsin's backfield, who's a lot shorter and a lot like they're smaller stature defensive backs. Like he broke some tackles, made people miss, and gained extra yards, which other than Jeremiah Smith and a little bit of Carnell Tate, nobody really else in this Ohio State wide receiver room has been able to do.
Yeah, I mean, and Mylan Graham has a couple targets now. Quincy Porter has a couple catches now. The proof is starting to become part of the pudding, Mick, where you can start to trust these guys. The other thing that I think is interesting about this receiving group, Jeremiah Smith obviously had the 2 drops against Texas, which were just absolutely bizarre to watch. Nate Roberts had a drop against Grambling as a freshman tight end. Ohio State as a team has 0 drops since then. So it doesn't matter if they're targeting – and Max Clare had a drop against Texas on that first 4th down. It should have been a first down and probably would have changed the face of that game, but whatever. They won. It doesn't matter. That was back in August. The point of that is, even when they're throwing it to like Brandon Ennis, when they're throwing it to Max Clare, Will Kesmerick, Bennett Christian has a couple catches this year. But now you're starting to fold in guys like Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter. Like they're all sure-handed. And so if you're not a negative, if you don't have to be a positive in the blocking game, I don't think, to give Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith a couple plays off. But you can't be a negative. And as long as you can block at a decent level and you're sure-handed when you do get the ball thrown your way, I think Ohio State's going to start to rely on these guys a little bit more. Now, Are they going to be on the field if it's a 3-point game against Michigan? No, they're just not. Are they going to be on the field in the national championship game if they're playing Alabama? Probably not. But they're proving that if they are, they can be a part of the offense even if when they are on the field. And I think back to last year's Penn State game where Brian Hartline took Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, and Brandon Ennis and Emeka Ibuka off the field, and he sent Bryson Rogers, Jaden Ballard, and Brandon Ennis onto the field, which was the clear-cut second-string wide receiver group. And Penn State was kind of lulled to sleep by it. Okay, they're going to run the ball. They're giving these receivers a play off. Ohio State goes play action, finds Brandon Ennis over the middle, wide open. He walks in for a touchdown. And that gave Ohio State the lead in Happy Valley. So, like, the idea that they don't trust younger receivers in big moments isn't true at all, even if they're backups. So I think the emergence of Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter could be huge for this offense moving forward. And look, I know Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are the two best receivers in the country. I know. But they can't play every single down. And I think it's important for these guys to show that they can step up and do things.
I said it on our Monday show, but I do think it's telling that Ohio State came in this game saying we want to pass the ball, and that included getting the ball to Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter to see what they could do. Like, it was not clearly just let's try different things with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. They wanted to figure out who else they could rely on as wide receivers, and that meant giving those guys some touches. And now, obviously, you have Penn State, who still has the talent to be a very good team. They have a good secondary. So, like, I don't know how much you experiment against those teams, but then you have Purdue, UCLA, and Rutgers coming up in November. So there's plenty of time to get the run up too. Like you said, I don't know how much they'll be on the field against Michigan, but if you need them if somebody goes down, God forbid, somebody goes down and gets injured, you have these guys that have started to get more reps as you go into the postseason and the biggest stretch of your schedule.
So, Mick, we can either talk about defense now, which we're not going to, or we can. There's some defensive questions. We might talk about them on Thursday. Maybe we'll just skip them because this defense has been so incredible. There's still things that need to be answered on the defensive side, but this is an offensive show, not offensive. Do not think that we were being offensive here. It's offensive, not offensive. I promise.
We were pretty offensive to Penn State and some of the teams on Ohio State's upcoming schedule just because. But they warranted that. You don't go in there and lose to Iowa and Iowa City and not get a little flack.
Yeah, they've deserved that. And Rutgers isn't very good since they started Big Ten play, even though they beat my Bobcats on opening night of the college football season. If you look at the rest of the schedule before Michigan, Purdue just got shut out by Northwestern. It's not a great November slate. UCLA is pretty decent now. We'll see how they look this week at Indiana. We'll get a good feel for what Ohio State's going to face on November 15th when the Bruins come to town based on what they do against Indiana. But, yeah, obviously the Michigan game is its own different category. That's like a one-game season. It doesn't even count, I don't think, as far as the 11-game regular season. It's its own thing. It's in its own silo, Mick, if you will. Happy harvest to all the farmers listening in the tractors here during this October harvest season. That is Mick Walker over there. I am just Spencer Holbrook, powering through a little bit of a cold. Sorry, I left the screen a couple times. Had to take care of that. That, of course, is Lettermen Row's Mick Walker. And the reason I say that is because all of his content is over at lettermenrow.com, where you can get it $1 for your first 7 days. That gets you a lot of coverage over here at lettermenrow.com. The Buckeyes, hey, listen, the Penn State game, not as glamorous, not as glitzy as it once was, but the Buckeyes still have a lot of recruits coming into town. Mick's going to have you covered over there as well with Berm and Alex Gleitman. You guys know those guys. You know and you love them. Austin Ward and I will have all the team stuff covered here during the off week. And then, of course, as Ohio State gets ready to play Jim Knowles and Penn State, we'll see you guys over there at lettermenrow.com. We'll see you guys back here on Thursday for another breakdown of the Buckeyes on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel.